Bonjour, bonsoir, bienvenue sur la chaîne du sorcereur. 1, 2, 1, 2, bienvenue sur la chaîne du sorcereur. On va essayer d'être à l'aise. Faire attention, ne jamais prendre tout pour acquis. Parce que rien n'est acquis, même si tu fais des choses bien. On va toujours te critiquer parce que tu as mal fait. Et essaie de voir si tu as mal fait quelque chose, tu as bien fait. Et si tu n'es pas truc, c'est pas grave parce qu'il y a certaines personnes qu'on favorise par rapport à d'autres. La vie n'est pas juste. Et toi aussi, tu es un privilégié. On n'a pas à te plaindre là et tout. Et la chance sourit aux audacieux. Voilà. Elle a réussi à gagner à son truc. Oui, et 1, 2, 1, 2, ouais, 1, 2. Ok, ce live un peu ce matin, nous avons truc, je n'en vois plus, qui me follow back, c'est bien fait. Bonjour, bonsoir, bienvenue sur la chaîne du sorcereur. On va mettre ça ici comme d'habitude et on va baisser tout le son là en attendant qu'on fasse bien les choses. Ouais. Bienvenue sur la chaîne du sorcereur. Encore une vidéo qui est un peu le live, qui est un peu la suite de mon sujet que j'ai fait sur l'individu qui on va réagir sur mon sujet que j'ai fait hier, puisque je l'ai réalisé hier et tout. Comme je le sais toujours, mes sujets marchent moins bien que mes lives, donc c'est pour ça que je fais les lives beaucoup plus maintenant, parce que j'ai remarqué que quand je fais les sujets, j'arrive pas à avoir les chiffres que je souhaite, alors que quand je fais des lives, même des lives juste lambda et autres et tout, que j'ai pas vraiment recherché, j'ai pas vraiment un truc et tout. C'est un peu ça. Et oui, on va parler de ce gars-là. Ce monsieur qu'on ne présente plus, qui a un peu la tête de gondole du football des années 2010, 2020. 2010, on va dire, oui, 2010 et 2020. C'est un peu truqué. Oui, on le présente plus. Considéré comme le plus grand joueur qui n'ait jamais eu de l'histoire du foot. À juste titre, même si on dit Cristiano, son rival, si on lui dit sur son rival, ça me dérange pas aussi. Parce que même, je dirais même son rival, même, il a beaucoup plus d'impact que cet individu-ci, qui n'a pas vraiment d'impact. Sur le plan truc, qu'est-ce que je pourrais encore dire sur le coco? Donc j'ai fait ce sujet hier là, qui m'a été inspiré par Ibrahim. S'il est là, ici, il revoit un peu là. On va réagir sur ça. Ce que je pense vraiment, je me disais, je n'allais jamais faire de sujet sur lui. Et tout, et la conversation d'hier m'a donné l'inspiration de le faire. J'ai dit, ah, voilà l'angle que je cherchais. Et tout, parce que je disais, il est tellement insipide le boy, que je ne sais même pas comment je vais faire le sujet sur le gars là. Donc je l'ai tellement trouvé insipide. Et tout, je me suis dit, je verrai jamais de sujet sur le truc. Dans l'histoire du football, c'est celui qui m'intéresse le moins. Et après, avec les conversations, le truc que j'ai eu au chat hier, j'ai dit, oh, putain, je vois un angle maintenant à adopter. Je vais faire ça. Et je vais juste parler le personnage sur cet angle-là. Je ne vais pas parler des oui, là, c'est inintéressant de le faire. C'est complètement inintéressant à le faire. Mais ça, là, je sais que sur Internet, sur le truc, c'est très peu de gens qui ont arrivé à avoir un regard comme ça sur le personnage. Parce que moi, je regarde beaucoup les joueurs sud-américains. Hein. Les joueurs sud-américains, je les regarde beaucoup. Je regarde beaucoup leur histoire. Par exemple, même des joueurs un peu moins... Bon, pour ceux qui suivent le foot, ils se rappellent de ce gars. Des gars comme Palacio, des légendes sud-américaines un peu, je regarde. Et pour les légendes sud-américaines, je les trouve tellement fades, cet individu. Mais ça s'explique. Ça s'explique sur beaucoup de choses. Parce que, c'est quelqu'un qui a continué son éducation en Catalogne à partir de l'âge de 8 ans, 10 ans, si je ne me trompe pas, ou 9 ans, ou 13 ans, je pense. Donc, il a fini son éducation footballistique, puis tout même son côté, il y a un aspect culturel un peu catalan un peu, qui est venu sur cet individu-là, et tout. Et globalement, il lui manque ce côté faible là, même s'il a gagné la Coupe du Monde. Hein. Il a gagné la Coupe du Monde et autres et tout. Même s'il y a un match, je dois avouer, il y a un match où le personnage m'a fait vibrer. On me dit, ah, comment il y a un seul match où Messi t'a fait vibrer? Oui, parce que moi, je vous dis, je ne regarde pas juste le fait que tu sois de dribbleur de 4 personnes, tu dribbles 4 personnes et que tu marques des buts, que tu as des trucs. Non, je regarde le contexte d'une situation, le contexte d'un truc et autres. Et il y a un match dont je vais parler de ça en live. Je voulais faire un sujet sur ça, mais je crois que je vais parler de ça en live. Qui reste pour moi le match le plus important de sa carrière. Et c'est même pas la finale de la Coupe du Monde. Donc on va réagir un peu à mon sujet. On va dire que ça a fait un peu narcissique, ça, de faire un truc sur ton propre sujet que tu as fait. Mais bon, on va voir le truc. Et let's go. N'hésitez pas à parler dans le chat, n'hésitez pas à réagir, comme d'habitude.
La question était au débat, non. Je me suis souvent posé la question, est-ce que je peux faire un sujet sur cet individu? La question était au débat, non. Parce que je ne voyais pas l'angle. Mais après le live dont vous voyez la vignette apparaître sur votre écran, et grâce à un des abonnés qui s'appelle Ibrahim 137, non 81 137, il m'a inspiré le sujet enfin que je pourrais faire sur ce gars-là. Enfin, je pourrais faire un sujet sur ce gars-là parce que ça a été inspiré par ce live que j'ai fait sur le Brésil là que vous voyez apparaître sur votre écran là. Et vous pouvez regarder, je le mettrai le lien en description. Et dans la conversation qu'on avait un peu en deux sur le chat, ça m'a permis de me dire, je vois maintenant quel angle je pourrais faire. Parce que j'ai l'impression que ce que je vais dire là, ce n'est pas trop... Je pense même pas avoir entendu ça sur... dans aucune chaîne YouTube n'a dit ça, aucun truc n'a dit ça. Et j'ai dit, je serais sûrement peut-être le premier à faire ça. Et je sais que je vais pas me faire des amis et autres et tout, parce que, faut dire, c'est sept à une secte, mais aussi ce Zozo aussi de Messi a aussi une secte de pas possible, que dès que tu touches à leur Dieu, il commence à péter un câble, que qu'est-ce que tu racontes là et autres et tout, parce que vous connaissez, l'autre époque ne connaît pas la nuance. Ne connaît pas la nuance, et c'est pour ça que, voilà, je vais me lancer sur ce truc-là. Vous savez, depuis que je commence à faire des sujets que je fais là depuis 3 ans sur ma chaîne, j'ai fait énormément de sujets sur les personnages de foot. Sur des personnages divers et variés que je trouve intéressants, que je trouve passionnants un peu, parce que ce qui m'intéresse derrière ta carrière, derrière ton truc, c'est l'histoire humaine que tu racontes, et surtout aussi, j'essaye de rechercher une mystique ou un truc, parce que oui, j'écris aussi souvent des scénarios, et il y a des joueurs qui dans leur parcours peuvent faire l'objet d'un film par rapport à ce que ça raconte, parce que comme je le dis souvent, les sportifs et surtout les footballeurs en particulier, ils ont un peu quelque chose qui rappelle à des gladiateurs, et tout. Et il y a une mystique, une mythe qu'on peut écrire derrière ces personnages un peu du ballon rond qui nous amène à nous émouvoir par rapport à leurs exploits, par rapport aux tubes, par rapport à leurs histoires et tout. Et généralement, comme si vous avez remarqué ma page et autres et tout, je ne suis pas seulement en train de chercher le grand joueur qui a une belle carrière, qui a un bon truc, qui raconte un truc. Je m'inspire un peu beaucoup aussi de contes de foot qui sait le faire beaucoup avec les joueurs. Et autres et tout, mais qui a une très belle culture foot aussi. Et tout que j'essaie de m'inspirer des trucs, des personnages tragiques, et tout. Je vous ai fait sur la Wonder Team autrichienne, je vous ai fait sur Crush, je vous ai fait sur tellement de personnages, Inzaghi et j'en passe et l'autre et tout. D'ailleurs, et tout, même des destins un peu plus moins éloquents, un peu comme Ben Arfa ou quelque chose comme ça. Et je dois vous avouer que j'avais fait un sujet sur Cristiano Ronaldo et Messi pour expliquer un peu la rivalité entre les deux. Et je me disais, ça allait être la seule fois. J'ai fait sur Cristiano Ronaldo seul parce que je le trouve intéressant, lui. Et j'avais dit, la seule fois où je vais évoquer Messi, c'est quand je vais parler de la rivalité CR7, la rivalité avec CR7, c'est que ça représentait un peu dans le football un peu, et qu'est-ce qui se jouait vraiment dans cette rivalité-là, et autres. Si vous n'avez pas vu mon sujet, n'hésitez pas à le regarder. Et moi, ce qui m'intéresse chez les personnages, chez les joueurs de foot, c'est ça, c'est cette dimension-là. Cette dimension-là. Il faut essayer de constater que le petit lutin argentin n'a pas cette dimension-là pour moi, mystique. Il est pour moi un surdoué du foot. Surdoué. Je ne dis pas qu'il n'a jamais travaillé pour être à haut niveau. Oui, il a travaillé. Mais c'est un surdoué du foot. Surdoué. Absolument à tomber par terre. Incroyable. Le plus grand joueur de tous les temps, si on le veut. Si on veut. Moi, je mettrais toujours Pelé. Mais, si vous voulez, le plus grand joueur de tous les temps. Dans sa capacité à... Est-ce qu'on peut décrire ce qu'il fait? Non, on ne peut pas décrire. Mais si, ça ne se décrit pas, ça se voit. Ça se voit, des trucs. Et le joueur est absolument extraordinaire. Il n'y a rien à dire, on n'a rien à dire sur le gars. Et tout. Il a une carrière extraordinaire. Mais le gars, c'est une légende sans saveur pour moi. Légende sans saveur, pourquoi? Parce que moi, ce qui me marque avec les personnages, et surtout les personnages sud-américains, c'est quand même quand ils évoquent, il y a une densité chez eux, il y a un truc chez eux. Messi ne sera jamais Maradona pour moi. Qui gagne même 2 Coupes du Monde, il ne sera jamais plus grand que Maradona pour moi. Maradona, pour moi, restera toujours quelque chose de beaucoup plus grand pour l'Argentine. Pas seulement pour la Coupe du Monde 86 qu'il a gagné, pas seulement pour le talent, mais ce que le personnage pouvait représenter d'Argentin dans son attitude, dans sa gouaille, dans même un peu parfois ses prises de position politiques controversées comme son.
Oui, comment tu vas? Tu disais, salut, moi aussi je m'appelais et d'autres mecs à cause de celui. Lui, je suis complètement d'accord avec toi. Je suis complètement d'accord avec toi. Le gars, il est... il n'évoque rien, enfin. Il n'évoque absolument rien. Même le joueur Pelé, je pense même que Pelé est plus fort que Messi. Hein. Je pense que Pelé est plus fort. Je pense que Pelé est plus fort que Messi. On va pas faire comme si le gars truc. Mais Pelé, il avait pied droit, pied gauche, la vision de jeu. Je prends Zidane et Ronaldo, tu as Pelé. Zidane, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho et Cristiano Ronaldo et Messi, tu as Pelé. Hein. Il peut faire tout ça. Hein. Et en plus, à l'époque, les défenseurs n'étaient pas tendres avec lui. Hein. Pas du tout. Et cette génération-là, elle est très protégée par les gars.
Comment dire encore le mot, son support un peu à Fidel Castro, énormément de choses étaient passionnantes chez ce personnage-là. Et tout. Mais Messi ne renvoie pas ça. Je suis désolé. Messi, au-delà de ne pas être déjà très loquace en dehors du terrain, c'est-à-dire en interview, c'est tempête dans un verre d'eau, tu t'endors comme pas possible parce que le gars n'a rien à raconter. Mais aussi, hormis ses belles performances sur le foot, il raconte pas grand-chose. Il raconte pas grand-chose et le personnage est très mièvre. Très très mièvre. Pour un joueur sud-américain et autres et tout, il est très mièvre et autres et tout. Pourquoi j'ai aimé des personnages comme Socrates? Pourquoi j'ai aimé des personnages comme Maradona? Pourquoi même chez les Argentins, quand je vois Riquelme, quand je vois même ses contemporains comme Di Maria, Tevez, des joueurs sud-américains.
Oui, tu as vu le Brésil 70 sur Netflix, la série sur le mondial. J'ai pas regardé parce que il y a j'ai déjà vu le truc de Brésil 70 dans le truc que je vous ai montré à la Football Greatest International. Ils avaient le truc aussi sur le Brésil de 70 entraîné par Zagallo, même si bon, Zagallo était un peu en pilotage automatique, hein. Tu aurais mis tout le monde là-bas, l'équipe là pouvait faire tout ce qu'elle voulait, hein. C'était un pilotage automatique, hein. Le milieu de terrain là, Gerson, Clodoaldo et Rivellino. Après je sais pas si c'est Tostao, Jairzinho et Pelé, si je me trompe pas. Après il y a Carlos Alberto sur le côté droit, j'oublie encore. Si je cite un peu en tête comme ça là, je peux un peu me tromper, hein. C'est une équipe de fous furieux, hein. Elle terrasse l'équipe de... Ah, c'est joué par des acteurs. Oh là là, j'ai même pas envie de regarder. Oh là là, je vais essayer de tester des trucs. Je fais pas confiance. Je fais vraiment pas confiance en ce genre de trucs là.
Des gars comme Enzo Francescoli, Romario, tous ces gars-là, et tout, c'est que chacun de ces gars-là renvoyait une passion et une fureur qui était propre à l'Amérique du Sud que Messi ne renvoie pas. Il ne renvoie pas du tout ça. Et tout. Quelque chose qui m'a absolument déçu sur le personnage. Et tout. Je l'ai évoqué même dans le live. Et tout. C'est que chaque joueur grand.
Test quand même, c'est pas dégueu. Rodrigo Santoro joue Joey Saldana. Ah, je vais quand même essayer de voir. Mon Dieu.
Un joueur sud-américain en général, ils ont un truc. Tu vois. Après qu'ils ont fini soit leur carrière en Europe, soit leur carrière de truc, ils essaient toujours de faire un dernier barreau d'honneur dans le club, soit le club de cœur, soit le club, soit le club de formation. C'est-à-dire soit le club de cœur, soit le club de formation d'origine de la pays. Quand tu vois Di Maria, lui qui a été formé à Rosario Central, il est revenu à Rosario Central pour gagner le championnat argentin avec eux. Quand tu vois par exemple Luis Suarez pour l'Uruguay, il est revenu dans le club de national et autres tout pour remporter le championnat uruguayen avec eux. Tevez était revenu, après la Juventus, Tevez était revenu à Boca. Riquelme, après qu'il soit chassé par, je sais plus, c'était Pellegrini ou autres tout du Villarreal, il revient à Boca Junior pour remporter encore une troisième Copa Libertadores avec le club, et avec le club et tout, et il finit sa carrière à Boca. Et tout. Je pense aussi Palermo, pareil. Et tout. Donc, il y a toujours quelque chose qui était de l'ordre du romantisme, du mystisme, d'une passion qui se dégage un peu par rapport à un truc. Mais Messi, et tout, après que le Barcelone le chasse, moi je m'attendais à ce qu'il fasse quelque chose un peu de panache.
Tevez est pour moi le vrai héritier de Maradona dans le style Aguay. Ouais, je suis d'accord. Même dans son attitude, même. C'est du Maradona tout craché, ça. Riquelme, Palermo, Tevez à Boca, génial. Riquelme, même, je pense, c'est plus grand que Maradona. Hein. Riquelme et Palermo, c'est plus grand que Maradona à Boca. Hein. Je pense. Riquelme est beaucoup plus grand que Maradona à Boca. Hein. Parce qu'on parle d'un gars qui a donné quoi, 3 Coupes Libertadores et une coupe intercontinentale. Riquelme, c'est beaucoup plus grand que Maradona à Boca, je pense. Simplement à Boca. À Boca spécifiquement, je pense que Riquelme et Palermo, ils sont plus grands que Maradona là-bas.
C'est là où j'attendais le personnage. Je disais, ce personnage qui m'a souvent ennuyé, tout malgré ses performances extraordinaires à Barcelone, malgré tout ce qu'il a fait, tout. Oui, il y a des grands moments de Barcelone quand tu regardes son histoire. Oui, le passage de transition avec son premier but, là où c'est donné par la passe de Ronaldinho, le premier triplé contre le Real Madrid, le but contre Osasuna, la manière dont il a tapé souvent le Real Madrid.
Tu fais danser Makelele. Oh mon Dieu. Tu fais danser Makelele et Jérémy Ndita et... C'était Makelele et Ndita et Salgado, si je me souviens bien.
Tout. La première Ligue des Champions sur le but de la tête. La deuxième Ligue des Champions. La deuxième Ligue des Champions avec le Barça contre Manchester en 2011. Vous voulez quoi encore? Qu'est-ce que je voulais encore dire? La MSN, la Copa América qui gagne enfin, qui est la première titre, malgré toutes les défaites qu'il avait eues en Argentine, la Coupe du Monde, oui. C'est des moments marquants un peu du truc, mais moi je ne sais pas pourquoi j'ai pas vibré, sauf une fois dont je vous parlerai de ça. Je vous parlerai de ça à la fin. Oui, Messi, il y a eu ces moments-là, c'était des moments marqués dans l'histoire du foot, hein, je ne me cache pas dessus, hein. Mais il y a toujours chez lui, sur le personnage, un manque de mysticisme que je sais que les Sud-Américains renvoient généralement. Et là où il m'a déçu profondément, c'est que quand il a été renvoyé de Barcelone, parce qu'il a été chassé de Barcelone, faut le rappeler, hein. C'est pas qu'il quitte Barcelone, c'est qu'il a été chassé à coups de cul. Parce que, comme il avait des monuments financiers et autres, et tout, on lui a dit, bon, on peut pas te payer là et autres, et tout, on va pas te reconduire ton contrat, tu vas partir. Il faut rappeler ça aux gens aussi qu'ils ne quittent pas Barcelone parce que, oui, le mec il avait voulu de challenge. Non, il se fait chasser à coups de cul de Barcelone. C'est pour ça qu'il pleure à la conférence de presse, ouais, là, et autres et tout. Je me disais, je vais essayer de voir si le personnage a un peu ce que je cherche généralement sur les Sud-Américains, lui que je le trouve si mièvre que ça. Surprends-moi. Est-ce que tu vas aller dans ton club de cœur et ton club d'enfance? Puisque avant qu'il ne vienne à Barcelone, le club là, était formé. C'était le Nouvel Zone, Old Boys. Et il a porté souvent le maillot du club là, même un peu haut et tout, comme vous le voyez ici et haut et tout, disant toujours que mon cœur est à Newell's. Il a toujours dit dans les interviews, il dit mon cœur est à Newell's. Nanana. Mon cœur est le Barça, certes, mon cœur, mais aussi c'est aussi Newell's. J'ai dit, pour ta Coupe du Monde 2022 que tu prépares, pourquoi ne pas signer un contrat particulier là-bas où tu pourrais t'efforcer? Est-ce que Nouvel All Boys revient sur le premier plan du football argentin? Et tout. Pourquoi ne pas penser à ramener Marcelo Bielsa peut-être dans le club qui quittait Leeds? Il n'avait pas encore signé un contrat avec la sélection uruguayenne. Tout, il pouvait le faire. Puisque Nouvel All Boys, c'est Marcelo Bielsa. Il faut connaître un peu l'histoire de Newell's et savoir ce que Marcelo Bielsa a fait de ce club-là en l'amenant de D3 en D1 avec les joueurs qu'il avait formés, et il a Il gagne le championnat argentin avec eux et autres et tout dans un style de football tellement chatoyant qui a enchanté non pas seulement l'Argentine mais tout le football sud-américain de cette période des début des années 90 avec cette scène légendaire. Alors, il porte le maillot de toutes les portants en vainqueur et avec le maillot et autres et tout. Ça me donne même encore des frissons rien qu'en pensant et autres et tout. Et tout. Je disais, pourquoi pas faire, toi, entraîné par Bielsa, et autres et tout, pour remettre Nouvelle All Boys et autres et tout, peut-être même au Coupe Libertadores. Tout en préparant ta Coupe du Monde de 2022. Tu reviens en Argentine. Ça aurait été tellement beau. Ça aurait été tellement beau, parce que les joueurs argentins font ça, généralement. Maradona, avant, à la Coupe.
Ouais, tu as dit quelque chose de très intéressant là. Même Romario, Ronaldinho, Neymar sont revenus. Oui, ils sont revenus. Emma, je crois que Emma était revenu. Hein. Attends, je vais vérifier. Je pense que Emma, il avait fait quand même une pige. Bon, je sais pas. Je me rappelle que Emma était à Benfica. Peut-être que je me trompe. Pablo Emma. L'idole de Messi d'ailleurs. C'est aussi une idole absolue de Messi d'ailleurs. Pablo Emma. C'était l'enfant de River Plate, non? C'est ça. C'est un fabuleux joueur, les blessures l'ont tué. Hein. Non, il était revenu à River Plate. Même si ça a duré seulement un match, mais il est quand même revenu. Il était à Estudiantes. Et il avait quand même fait une petite pige à River Plate. Et c'est vrai qu'après la plupart de sa carrière, il a fini à Benfica. Pablo Emma. Ortega, je pense que Ortega jouait en Argentine. C'est Ariel, non? Ariel Ortega. En 2006, il était revenu à River Plate, ici là. Après, il avait été prêté en Argentine. Même en 2002. 2002, il est à River Plate. Quand il est à la Coupe du Monde 2002. Même Ortega, il était revenu. Même lui, ils reviennent tous. Ils font toujours ça. Romario, alors j'en parle pas. Il a fait tout le tour du Brésil, lui. Ils reviennent tous. Ils reviennent tous. Ils reviennent tous. Tous. Ils reviennent au pays au moins. Il aurait pu revenir à Noël. Il vient là-bas au PSG, frère. Vous voulez que je bande sur ça? Ça c'est que sud-américain, ça. Le mec est haut et tout, il va signer un contrat au PSG. Ça c'est quoi ça? Au PSG. Messi et le PSG. Et après il finit à l'Inter Miami. C'est un tocard. C'est ça votre légende, ça?
Coupe du Monde 94, il prépare sa Coupe du Monde 94, il est à Boca. Il revient à Boca. Il est à Boca quand il prépare sa Coupe du Monde 94, même si elle ne se déroule pas comme elle le souhaite avec la suspension par rapport à la truc de cocaïne qu'on voyait là. Tout. Il la préparait, il était à Boca. On était au crépuscule de sa carrière, il était à Boca. J'aurais voulu voir ça avec ce gars-là. De revenir là, puisqu'il clame tous les jours que son club, c'est Nouvelle All Boys. Et tout. Et qu'est-ce qu'il fait, le mec? Le mec va signer au PSG. Un club avec qui il n'a aucune histoire. Un club où il n'a aucune corrélation. Pour quelle raison? Juste parce qu'il peut se mettre dans les émoulements de son salaire. Et on me dit que Messi est romantique. Mon Dieu, c'est le personnage, j'ai dit, mais je suis même pas surpris. J'ai dit, waouh, comme je le voyais sur toi. Petit personnage. Il aurait bien pu faire ça. Et en plus, là où le personnage a été encore 2 fois plus dégoûtant, c'est son comportement au PSG. Au PSG, il s'est comporté vraiment comme le dernier des souks. La façon dont il était complètement méprisant avec les supporters, la façon dont l'implication était complètement absente. Surtout avec le salaire de fou qu'on lui a donné, les critiques, lui et sa famille, que la ville de Paris est ceci, cela, blablabla. On parle du comportement de Neymar, mais mon Dieu, le comportement de Messi au PSG était absolument scandaleux. Et je peux comprendre encore les fans du PSG, comment ils ont encore les boules que ce gars-là les ait volé autant d'argent et tout, parce que son comportement était 3 fois plus honteux, où il est venu seulement en centre Thalassa, de faire du Thalasso, pour préparer sa Coupe du Monde un peu dans le centre d'entraînement qu'il était le PSG pour lui. Immensement scandaleux. Le personnage était pour moi scandaleux. Et c'est là où j'ai dit, Messi n'a pas de saveur. Pour un Sud-Américain, il n'a pas de saveur. Pour un Argentin, il n'en a pas du tout. J'oublie même encore, j'aurais pu prendre encore un exemple comme Enzo Francescoli qui a fait la plupart de sa partie carrière en Amérique du Sud, même la grande partie de sa carrière, il a fait à River Plate, et tout, il avait gagné la Coupe de la Libertadores dans les années 80, si je ne me trompe pas, et il revient en 90 avec une nouvelle génération, il revient à River Plate et il gagne la Coupe de la Libertadores en 96, si je me souviens bien. La génération, il avait porté les Crespo, les Ortega, les Mar, je me souviens bien un peu, alors qu'il était parti, je pense, en France, battre à Racing, à Marseille, et de voir après que ce joueur-là, après comment on appelle ça, Coupe intercontinentale, affronte Zidane, celui dont Zidane est l'idole, puisque l'idole de Zidane, c'est Enzo Francescoli, tout le football de Zidane vient d'Enzo Francescoli, il voit ces 2 gars s'affronter, c'est les histoires que je revois. C'est ce que j'attendais, mais c'est d'avoir un peu, il manque de mystique, ce personnage-là. Pour un Sud-Américain, il manque de mystique. Pour moi, qui ai suivi souvent l'histoire du foot, il manque de mystique. Il n'est pas Riquelme pour moi. Il n'est pas Lucho Gonzalez pour moi. Il n'est même pas Pastore pour moi. En termes sur ce plan-là. Il est trop bien. Et même s'il a gagné sa Coupe du Monde, la Coupe du Monde, pour moi, qu'il a gagné, c'est comme une ligne au palmarès qui s'est ajoutée. C'est tout ce que l'histoire de Messi raconte sur la Coupe du Monde. C'est sa ligne de palmarès qui lui manquait dans sa grande carrière de footballeur qu'il avait. Mais il n'y a pas une histoire forte. Il n'y a pas une histoire forte, vraiment. C'est juste la dernière ligne de palmarès qui racontait à celui qui était le meilleur joueur de tout. Ce qu'on considère comme le meilleur joueur de l'histoire. Point final. À part ça, il n'y a rien. Ça n'a pas une mystique particulière. C'est pas comme la Coupe du Monde de 2002 de Ronaldo, de quelqu'un qu'on a pensé perdu au football. Quand on voit 2002 Ronaldo et autres, on dit mec, on pensait que le gars a été perdu pour le football. Il y a des mystiques particulières. C'est ça qui me dérange avec ce personnage de Messi et autres et tout. Moi, souvent même quand je vois même Ronaldo le Brésilien et autres et tout, il y a un match là, je ne sais plus lequel est haut et tout, je pense. Si je me trompe pas, c'est plus je retrouverai ce match-là et haut et tout. Mais après sa grosse blessure de la Roma et haut et tout, il revient de blessure et haut et tout. 3 ans après, 2 ans après 2 ans de non-activité au football à la saison 2002, je sais plus si c'était contre Sienne, je sais plus si c'était contre Udine, je sais plus si c'était contre quel club là. Et haut et tout. Et lui qu'on était parti avec cette image grave là de celui qui se blesse avec son genou qui lâche là haut et tout comme vous le voyez là et haut et tout qui avait fait le tour du monde où tout le monde du football était en larmes par rapport à ça. Il y a ce match, je sais plus, le championnat il revient un peu en mars, avril un peu à l'Inter, on voit comment Ronaldo revient encore à jouer, on se dit ah peut-être
Recoba, il a fini en Uruguay. Ça c'est une mission idéale hein, pour Recoba. Il aurait pu devenir le meilleur joueur uruguayen de tous les temps. Il était hyper sinusoïdal. Le joueur préféré de Moratti.
Va revenir à la Coupe du Monde ou quelque chose comme ça. C'est encore hypothétique et autres et tout. Et il marque ce but-là et tout. Et autres et tout. Je me rappelle encore mon père à côté qui a un peu l'émotion de dire regarde et il dit mais c'est un grand champion le gars là. Pas parce que ça m'a gagné, mais par rapport au parcours du gars qui s'était blessé. Je dis pas que Messi n'est pas un champion, mais il y a une mystique autour de certains personnages que Messi lui manque. Il n'y a pas de mystique chez ce gars-là. Cristiano Ronaldo là, hein, je l'aime pas le personnage footballistiquement parlant, pas humainement, mais footballistiquement parlant, ce qu'il a représenté. Vous avez vu mon sujet sur lui. Mais Ronaldo a cette mystique-là, mais lui il n'en a pas. C'est juste un génie du foot. C'est juste un simple génie du foot. Les joueurs sud-américains ont souvent cette mystique-là. Tu peux l'avoir chez Pelé, tu peux l'avoir chez Zico. Tu peux l'avoir chez des personnages comme Socrates, tu peux l'avoir chez des personnages comme Enzo Francescoli, tu peux l'avoir chez des personnages comme Riquelme, tu peux l'avoir même chez des personnages comme Valera de l'Uruguay, joueur sud-ouest de son temps, qui a marqué, oui, son époque, mais qui n'a aucune saveur et autres et tout. Et donc, à part son talent footballistique, il n'évoque rien et autres et tout. Et c'est pour ça que le personnage, quelque part pour moi, mis à part son talent, est banal pour moi. Son attitude de ne pas finir sa carrière au Newell's Old Boys et de finir à l'Inter Miami de Beckham m'a tout dit sur le gars. J'oublie même Micho Gonzalez était revenu même à River Plate à un moment donné, en 2015. Après qu'il était parti au Porto, Marseille, il est revenu à River Plate. Lui, ici, il finit où sa carrière? À l'Inter Miami. Voilà.
Oui, c'était mon sujet de truc un peu là. En attendant un peu, parce que j'étais en train de truc, je vais vous laisser toujours football, greatest team et autres et tout. Hier on avait fait sur le Brésil et autres et tout. Il y a toute la playlist là. Je vous laisserai de la playlist un peu couler là. On a fait le Brésil 82, il y a le truc 58-62. Je vais mettre à partir, bon l'Espagne on va sauter, le Brésil truc. Je vais mettre à partir de 74. Vous allez voir un peu aussi là. N'hésitez pas à enjoy. Je reviens après. Je suis un peu fatigué là.
In 1974, a European football team revolutionized the international game. Playing with a unique style and adopting a new philosophy, Holland captured the imagination of fans across the globe.
Total football. What is total football?
We had defenders going forward, midfielders coming deep, everyone attacked.
We lost the final, but everyone was talking about the Dutch side.
Football is an enjoyment. You love the game, you enjoy watching it, and you enjoy doing it. And that's how it should be.
For much of the 20th century, Holland was a quiet and unremarkable place to be. A flat and featureless land mirrored by a conservative population that was inward-looking and old-fashioned. As it was with society, so it was with football. Professionalism was not permitted until the mid-50s, and as a result the Dutch game was slow and unrefined. Only once before, in 1938, had Holland qualified for the World Cup, and the post-war record was little better.
Federation was very poor organized. Nothing to do with clubs, people who just in their spare time did a few things. And that's why never everybody was interested into the national team. Because it was nothing special. So, well, sometimes we went, sometimes I didn't. And it was just a little mess.
But in the 1960s, things began to change. Dutch society underwent a social and cultural upheaval. Art and music became increasingly experimental. Holland became the land of the avant-garde. Arguably the biggest representatives of this social revolution were FC Ajax of Amsterdam. With their long hair and carefree attitude, Ajax began the 70s winning 3 European Cups in succession, playing with a style and swagger that had never been seen before.
Heel handig het schot van Haan en het is een goal! 2-0 voor Ajax! 2-0 voor Ajax! Arie Haan uit windschotten!
It was a free spirit time and it was a free spirit team, but the same with the good rock bands like the Beatles and the Stones at that time. They had the discipline to make good music and they had the discipline to play good football.
Ik denk dat Ajax
I think Ajax revolutionized football and later the national team as well.
Ik denk dat
Everyone liked what we did. We had a different philosophy on the game. We could defend, we could play hard, we could also play well technically. And that was all thanks to Michels.
Het werk van Michels.
Shaki, deze jongen heeft dus een hele goede naam.
He was the coach Holland at the 1974 World Cup, but it was at Ajax in the 60s and 70s that Rinus Michels formulated the ideas he'd later apply to the national side. Michels believed the game was about the use and control of space. He demanded his players be ultra fit and able to interchange positions. Der General was the architect of what became known as total football.
They were experts on the simple elements of the game. By kicking the ball, accepting the ball and the position play. That talent they had.
I think one of the greatest things of Ajax at that time, not was only when we had the ball, but especially when we didn't have the ball. It took such a small time to get it back. If you've got a game where you want the ball, what you're going to do with the ball, you try to attack.
Ja! Wat een wissel daar! Doelpunt van Johan Cruijff!
At Ajax, Michels nurtured the talents of players who would later prove so influential to Holland at the 1974 World Cup. Players like Johnny Rep, Johan Neeskens, Wim Surbier, Arie Haan and Ruud Krol. But one player stood out from the crowd. Johan Cruyff was 3 times World Player of the Year and captain for club and country.
It's not a question of pressure, it was more responsibility. Michels was a big help because he arranged the organization outside the field and I could arrange it inside the field.
Johan Cruyff was...
Johan Cruyff was a football giant. Not just as a player, but as captain and as a leader on the pitch. He was the one who really guided us. Of course, we were all good players ourselves, but Johan was the most important in our team.
In ons team had natuurlijk briljante acties.
He was brilliant technically, stuff that only he could do. When you played with him, you didn't notice it straight away. But when you look back at the films, you realise how fantastic he was. He was a genius and could decide the game all by himself.
Ajax's great rivals Feyenoord were also an influence on the national team, winning the European Cup, the UEFA Cup and the Dutch League twice in the early 70s. They provided 7 players for the World Cup squad, and whilst Ajax had Cruyff, Feyenoord had Willem van Hanegem.
Willem van Hanegem is a legend when it comes to football. He has the best left foot I have ever seen. Van Hanegem was a genius, and not because of his speed. He wasn't the fastest, but because of his quick thinking. He was excellent technically, and he could read a match. And when all that comes together, you belong amongst the very best players in the world.
Ajax had a decent team back then, but they weren't really better than Feyenoord. Often they were lucky. After us, they won the European Cup 3 times, and that's fantastic. Whilst we were always knocked out of the competition in a silly way. But that was the only thing. They didn't have a better team than Feyenoord.
If you look at Feyenoord and you look at Ajax, different styles, but if you put it together with the best they had, with Van Hanegem and Janssen and Rijsbergen, you created a perfect team.
But the icing on the cake for the Dutch was someone who had never played for Ajax or Feyenoord. At just 22, Rob Rensenbrink left Holland for a career in Belgium, making a real name for himself at Anderlecht. as a fast, goal-scoring left winger.
Robbie Rensenbrink, he was the Cruyff of Belgium. I've never seen anyone like him. They called him the Snake Man because of his runs and because he did things that were impossible. Rensenbrink had an amazing left foot. He was a top player.
He was exceptional good. He was a little bit man in the shadow. Had to do that he played for Belgian team. If he would have played for Ajax or for Feyenoord, it would be a different story. But still, I think in Dutch history, he's an icon.
Under coach František Vadrons, Mikkels was appointed only 3 months prior to the World Cup. The Dutch began qualifying for West Germany by beating Norway and Iceland home and away, scoring 24 goals in just 4 matches. But Belgium offered stiffer resistance. A previous 0-0 draw against their neighbours in Antwerp meant everything was still to play for.
Trekt hem voor.
I joined up for the game against Belgium at the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam. Our last match in the group, which we had to draw to qualify for the World Cup.
Belgium had done a very, very strong team. And we were very lucky there. Very lucky because it was an offside goal, but everybody, I think 80% of people say it was a real good goal. So they should have been out.
Ja, hij is goed genomen die bal. En hij is erin. Maar hij kunt hem afweten als buitenspel en dat lijkt me ook zeer duidelijk.
Nederland. Holland had a bit of luck with that free kick.
Met een vrije trap.
Was it offside? Was it not offside?
Offside of geen offside? Weet je niet dat...
Of course we said it was offside.
Natuurlijk was offside.
The goal was disallowed and we drew.
Toen speelden we gelijk.
And that's how we actually qualified for Germany.
Voor Duitsland.
Hij fluit af. En Nederland heeft zich geplaatst voor de eindronde van het wereldkampioenschap.
Everybody realized that okay, we're going to the World Championship and hey, we've got a big name to defend now. These 4 years, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, all these summers, a Dutch team was in the final of the Champions League or in the European Cup. 5 years and dominated Europe. We can't look like fools, it's impossible. Michaels came in, got the organization ready. We had a great team. We had some great players which we showed already a long time before. And that's why it went well.
With Mikkels now in charge, Holland were put through a tough pre-tournament training camp. He demanded the team play his way, with an emphasis on permanent attack. And for this he made changes to the Dutch lineup.
Mikkels just leaded the whole process. He wanted a goalkeeper that could play. He came with the idea of putting Jan Jongbloed in, not as a goalkeeper, but as the first, well, he said the first attacker.
Arie Haan as middenvelder.
Arie Haan, a midfielder. He became a central defender alongside Rijsbergen, the Feyenoord player, whilst Jan Jongbloed went in goal. There's no denying that Jongbloed could play football. He could, but he wasn't a great goalkeeper. But for the style of football we played, he was the best, especially when we tried to play offside.
There were 2 sides to Mikkels. He was a very strict coach, but on the other hand, if the opportunity presented itself, he would be the first to join the party. But in the beginning we trained very hard, and whenever anyone was late, he would make us start all over again.
Mikkels was a fun guy, but in his work he was very strict. He had one goal, and that was to succeed with the team, playing football the way he thought it should be played. And he did everything to achieve that goal. It was tough.
I remember the evening before our opening match against Uruguay. All the players had to go and see Mikkels. I had a bag full of tennis balls and a racket with me, because I was going to play tennis with Piet Keizer. So I go in to see Mikkels, and he's sitting there. And he says, "What are you doing?" "What do you mean, what are you doing? Didn't you want to see me?" Then he says, "Why do I have to tell you what to do? You know, right? Do you really want to play tennis this evening?" "Yes," I said. I'm on my way to play tennis now. So he says, go and play then. So I leave.
Dus ik weg.
But I'm walking down the stairs and I'm thinking, this is really clever. Because this is how he lays the responsibility with you. He says, why do I have to tell you? I should know what I have to do. And of course, we knew what we had to do.
With the squad now adapted to Mikkel's vision of total football, the Dutch were confident ahead of their opening game of the World Cup against Uruguay. The South Americans were totally outplayed in Hanover, Johnny Rep scoring both goals in a 2-0 win. A scoreless draw with Sweden followed before Bulgaria were thrashed 4-1 in Dortmund to cement Holland's passage to the second round.
The Van Hanegems and the Cruyffs and the Rensenbrinks and the nation of this world realized they needed a good World Cup to be reckoned as a big player. And also, you know, it's the first time they were hungry, and you could see from the beginning on, it was an inspired team.
It felt as if every game was a home game. There must have been 20,000 Dutch supporters at every match. It felt as if we were playing in Holland.
In the second round, Holland faced Argentina, East Germany and Brazil. Against the Argentines, the Dutch produced their most scintillating display yet, winning 4-0 and playing some of the most stylish football ever witnessed at a World Cup.
I scored in that game, a great game, a game that I will always remember. Well, that's the same with all the games I played for the national team. It was typical Dutch weather. It was raining. In Holland we play a lot in the rain, so the conditions suited us. It was our weather, our style of game. We knew we were better than them. We knew we could win.
The football we played in 1974. People hadn't seen that before. The way it all flowed so naturally. We would employ the tactic that if our left back Kroll moved forward and wide, then I knew I had to defend. That's how it would all move around. It was very fluid football.
In my opinion, nobody is more important than anyone else in a team. One might get more attention or is a bit better than a teammate, but in a team, everyone is important. If he doesn't get possession of the ball, then he can't pass it to you. And if you do get it, we're not able to receive it or we're tightly marked, then you can't do anything with the ball. That's how the game works.
We went out to win the game. And that's what's been our mentality. And how do we win? Well, I'm not physically, so I need the ball. So it's been more or less that way of thinking where the transformation was not to go back and have a look what happens. No, go out there and just try to win.
4 days later, and again in the rain, highly rated East Germany were seen off 2-0. Rob Rensenbrink scoring his only goal of the tournament. Holland's final group game against Brazil was effectively the semi-final of the World Cup. A bruising encounter, but without doubt the match of the tournament.
Cruijff geeft de pas en hij scoort! Hij scoort, Johan! Hij scoort! Schitterend gedaan! Met de punt van de schoen, een hele kromme voorzet van Cruijff.
Wij hadden dus een combinatie.
We could play with great combinations.
Voetballen.
Fantastic football.
Hard, soms. We konden als een team.
It'd be like art sometimes. We could be physical too, and that was important because that was an integral part of the Dutch side.
Dat was ook het Nederlands elftal.
Brazilië verslaan met 2-0.
To beat Brazil 2-0, that was a great achievement.
Brazilië
Brazil were world champions in 1970, and a little country like ours came along and played Brazil off the pitch.
That was really a game where everybody was focused and everybody did what they had to do. We didn't only outplay the Brazilians, but we outplayed them with the best football. It was not only the result. The result at the end, well, it could be 2-1, 3-1 or 3-0 or 2-0. It didn't even matter. We just played football which the world loved, and that against the Brazilians.
After 5 wins and 1 draw, 14 goals scored and only 1 conceded, Holland had reached the World Cup final for the first time. At the Olympic Stadium in Munich, they would face West Germany, European champions and pre-tournament favourites. The Germans had laboured through the competition, but playing in front of their home crowd meant they would prove formidable opponents.
They had a kind of attitude that was quite in contrary with the Dutch, you know, free spirit, open mind. German had a little bit, you know, they were playing counter football a little bit, it was different characters. And that put all together created a kind of attitude with the Dutch of, okay, we're going to teach them a lesson.
We knew they were Germans. Germans is always difficult because they will go until the end. We knew we were much better. We knew we played better. We were not afraid at all.
Holland kicked off and immediately began an extraordinary passage of play, insolently moving the ball around the pitch. At one point, Cruyff had the ball at his feet with only goalkeeper Youngblood behind him. No German player had touched the ball when Cruyff drew Uli Hoeneß's foul.
Cruyff. En inderdaad heeft hij volgens mij de Cruyff aan de leendoor wordt neergelegd. En het is een penalty in de eerste minuut.
Penalty, and up stepped Johan Neeskens.
Ik dacht dat het Hoeneß was, maar daar komt de penalty van Neeskens 1-0 de Leiden.
It was the perfect exposition of total football and the most explosive start to a World Cup final in history.
Ik denk dat wij hadden een bepaalde stijl.
We had a style to surprise our opponents in the first 15 minutes, with lots of pressing, lots of movement and lots of passing to try and score a goal as fast as possible.
En toen kregen we ook nog die Marshall dat we bedenken.
We got off to a good start, winning that penalty right at the very beginning of the game. But I remember thinking there could be a bit of a problem. Because we then thought to ourselves, they're Germans, they're not our friends, so let's humiliate them in front of their own fans. Now, the trouble was that one half of our team decided to keep playing like we had been playing for the whole tournament, and the other half started taking the mickey out of them. That's why our game plan broke in two.
For more than 20 minutes the Dutch toyed with the Germans, but midway through the first half Bernd Holzenbein's run drew a lunging challenge from Wim Jansen, and once again referee Jack Taylor pointed to the spot. Paul Breitner converted.
We went and held back a bit. I don't know why. It wasn't like the Dutch team to do that. We always put a lot of pressure on to score the second goal.
We have played some very good matches at the World Cup, and we really thought we would win the final two. Who knows, maybe that was where we went wrong. Maybe we were wrong to think beforehand we would simply beat those Germans. Maybe we were a bit too sure of ourselves.
We missed such a lot of chances, so we played quite well, but the details were not there, and one of the things were scoring the goals. I think we played a little too confident, and at the same time, if you do that, you don't do the things perfectly, and that's why we didn't win the game, that's why we lost.
Na de wedstrijd had ik niet zo'n...
After the game, I didn't feel too bad. Of course we lost the final, but we were proud to have got there. The Netherlands had come from nothing in football to being at the center of the football world.
Een landje geworden op de voetbalwereld.
That, of course, was very important for us.
Belangrijk voor ons en dat gaf ons veel voldoening.
The Dutch returned home and were greeted by thousands at Schiphol Airport and many more in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. Despite losing the final, Mikkels and his men were national heroes.
We flew back to the Netherlands and first went to Amsterdam. That really was unforgettable. It made us forget about the outcome of the final. It was only then we realised the excitement we had aroused in the country.
The Dutch national team had never achieved anything. For the first time, the whole country had watched all the matches. Then the final. And, well, it was a shame we lost. But the public's enthusiasm for us was enormous.
Het was een fantastisch party.
It was a fantastic party.
Naar het paleis van de koningin.
We went to the Royal Palace. There was a party with the Prime Minister of the time. There was dancing. We just didn't expect to get such an amazing reception.
Dat hadden we dus echt niet verwacht.
The Oranje may have come home empty-handed from West Germany, but they'd left a lasting legacy. In 1978, without Cruyff, Van Hanegem and Mikkels, they again reached the final of the World Cup, losing to hosts Argentina. And in 1988, with Mikkels again in charge, they won their first major trophy at the European Championship.
I think that a lot of coaches should realize what is more important, that you win today a trophy or they talk 40 or 50 years later about the way of playing, because what you do then is giving supporters a dream of how the way football can be played, and that's something that a football player but also a coach can be very proud of.
Het is eigenlijk wel te gek dat
It's crazy that Holland lost the final. Yet everyone remembers the Dutch team. I was in Saudi Arabia and I mentioned Edgar Davids to the people. And they say, Edgar Davids? What about Patrick Kluivert? But they didn't know who Patrick Kluivert was either.
Kluivert?
Then I mentioned Rensenbrink. And they've got the VHS on the shelf on the wall. That's just crazy.
Dat is ja eigenlijk gek.
The whole world was sad that we lost, because when they saw us playing, everybody was happy. They just went home laughing, and that's the nicest thing in life. If you can laugh and enjoy yourself, it's one of the most important things there is.
Brazil, a word that conjures up images of beaches, carnival, music and football. A nation with more World Cup wins than any other, one which has spread the gospel of O Jogo Bonito around the world. Their World Cup winning teams of 1958 and 1962 laid the foundations of a football dynasty and restored a nation's pride. The World Cup of 1950 was supposed to herald a new era for Brazil, a coming of age for a country that felt inferior to its European and American counterparts. As Europe counted the cost of the Second World War, South America was left relatively unscathed. And with new stadia and a new infrastructure, this was Brazil's time to shine. The team delivered, and in the final required only a draw to win the trophy.
Everyone thought Brazil would destroy Uruguay. We were the big favourites.
Uruguay, however, had not read the script.
He shot. Goal to Uruguay. Goal for Uruguay. It was only then I realized Brazil were losing the World Cup. It was an incredible silence. I said at the time that I was able to hear silence. Silence has the sound of tears. The women were crying, even the men were sobbing, and we could hear it. It was so bitter. A silence that swept everything else away. And it lasted a long time.
2-1 defeat, the so-called Maracanazo, devastated Brazilian confidence on and off the pitch.
It's a date that we can't escape from, like a branding iron that has left a burning mark on a cow.
Brazil didn't play again for 2 years, and another 4 before they returned to the Maracanã. And so superstitious were the Brazilians, they even changed the colour of their shirts from white to yellow. The 1954 World Cup brought a quarter-final defeat at the hands of Hungary. 4 years later, the selectors made a significant and inspired decision, calling up a young striker who'd just joined Santos, Pelé.
I wasn't surprised as he already stood out at Santos. In 1957, he'd already shown what a fantastic player he was going to be. Pelé wasn't discovered in 1958. He was simply discovered by the rest of the world in 1958. But here in Brazil, he was already very highly regarded for a young player, and he had a great future ahead of him.
But as the team departed for Sweden, expectations were far from high.
Many of the fans at home did not believe in the team, and perhaps that was why the team played in a calm manner. It played with a certain tranquility because we didn't have any responsibilities.
Also included in the squad was a 24-year-old Botafogo winger, Mané Garrincha, the darling of the Maracanã, with a unique body shape and one leg longer than the other. Nicknamed the Angel with the Bent Legs, he brought a childlike joy to the pitch. His skills were not in doubt, but some perceived a lack of maturity in his conduct on and off the pitch.
Garrincha had been dropped from the team after a warm-up game against Fiorentina. He scored a beautiful goal, dribbling past 2 or 3 defenders, then stopped the ball on the goal line before backheeling it in. The backroom staff didn't think he was mentally prepared to play in a World Cup after that.
They thought, here's a guy who's very humble and a bit of a loose cannon. Is he going to do the same thing in the World Cup? They saw it as irresponsible, but he knew it was just a friendly, and the World Cup would be different.
This World Cup would be different for Brazil in many ways. The backroom staff was comprehensive, comprising a trainer, supervisor, administrator, treasurer, doctor, and even a dentist. The medical staff conducted rigorous checks and were horrified to find most of the players in terrible health.
I think that Brazil were quite keen on organisation. And so the group of directors at the time organised everything in a spectacular manner. We got the team together 6 months before, but not just to train, but to verify the fitness of the players. There were players that had some bad teeth that needed removing, stuff like that. There were players that were receiving treatment for knee pain.
The team's doctor, Hilton Gosling, travelled to Sweden the year before the tournament, assessing various training bases and hotels across the host cities. Off the pitch, nothing was left to chance. On it, England, the Soviet Union and Austria would provide the group opposition. The selectors headed by Vicente Feola played safe for the opening match. With Pelé injured, Garrincha was not named in the starting 11. Despite this, Brazil began their campaign by defeating the Austrians 3-0, with 2 goals from Altafini and a third from Nilton Santos.
The pitch was a potato field. It was very bumpy, but we were good that day. I scored the opening goal from a shot from Zagallo, and I also scored the third goal after one from Didi.
A battling 1-1 draw with England meant that progression into the next round hinged on the game against the Soviet Union. The Soviets were fancied by many to do well after their victory in the 1956 Olympics. For Brazil, Garrincha and Pelé had both impressed in training, and the Brazilian selectors played their trump cards.
The third game against the Soviet Union was when both Garrincha and Pelé started for us. And Brazil suddenly got even better. Zito also came in then as the side was starting to evolve.
The two of them started against the USSR and they performed spectacularly.
It was a team that had really improved with every game, and we got stronger and stronger.
Garrincha terrorized the Soviets from the outset, and Vavá scored the first of his 2 goals after just 3 minutes.
He had a memorable game. The two of them, him and Pelé, defeated the Soviets that day.
After we beat Russia, we knew we had a chance to win the tournament, and our confidence began to rise.
A 1-0 victory over Wales further enhanced that belief. Pelé and Garrincha retained their places in the starting 11 and continued to impress.
At
the time, many journalists were writing, Pelé's just a 17-year-old kid. And look at all the responsibility he's been given. What must he be thinking? And I thought, my God. But in the national team, I didn't have much responsibility really. That lay with Nilton Santos, and Didi, Bellini, the older, more experienced players. But for me, at that time, well, I was just living my dream. I had no worries at all. I just wanted to play.
The 17-year-old played a starring role to set up a semi-final against yet another European powerhouse.
We faced France, and they were a goal-scoring machine because Jules Fontaine was the top marksman of that side and of the whole championship.
People always ask me which was the best Brazil side I ever played in. Was it the team from 1958 or 62, 1966 or 1970? Obviously, the teams from 1958 and 1970 both won the World Cup. So those are the two sides everyone likes to compare. I've always said that both teams were really good, very strong. But I think the 1958 Brazil side was, individually speaking, better than the 1970 team.
We were playing a really good brand of fluid football. Ball, touch and artistry. It was incredible and hadn't been seen before. Only those who were in the stadiums in Sweden could bear witness to this incredible, exciting brand of football Brazil played.
In a 5-2 win, Pelé's hat-trick grabbed the headlines, but Didi scored the pick of the goals.
I'd say that the most important player of that time was probably Didi, because even though Didi was not the captain of the team, that was Bellini, Didi was the playmaker of the side.
Foregoing the WM formation employed by most teams, coach Vicente Feola initiated a new 4-2-4 system that was designed to get the best from his attacking players.
In 1958, we had Gilmar, who was one of the best goalkeepers in the world back then. We had Didi, one of the best central midfielders in the world. We had Garrincha and Vavá, who was the best striker around back then. We even had Nilton Santos, the best left-sided player to have ever appeared in South America. So individually, it was the best national team we ever had, without any doubt at all.
Era, para mim, a melhor, sem dúvida nenhuma.
Brazil were through to a second World Cup final, but the spectre of 1950 remained.
Sweden were at home and had already beaten some good teams on their way to the final.
The 29th of June 1958, Brazil's date with destiny.
On the day, it actually rained for a while, which left us a little nervous as we knew the Europeans were better at playing on a wet surface.
We got a real scare when they scored their first goal.
I was replaying in my mind the video of 1950, Brazil against Uruguay in the Maracanã, when we'd lost, and I thought, are we really going to have to lose again?
Brazilians everywhere feared the worst.
I was on the bench and I had a director from our team next to me, and when we conceded, he started crying, and we all just tried to console him and calm him. But he said it will be just like 1950.
But those on the pitch would not be denied. Vavá led the way with 2 first-half goals before an act of teenage impudence by Pelé that is still talked about today.
Na Copa do Mundo de 58,
the 1958 World Cup was the first time the Europeans had ever seen a trick which we called the hat in Brazil.
nós chamamos de chapéu, né? Porque
back then, the Europeans had never seen anything like it, and we brought it with us from Brazil.
Nessa Copa do Mundo.
Zagallo and Pelé again clinched a 5-2 victory for Brazil.
In Sweden, it was our first World Cup win. It was incredible, marvellous, just one big party.
We were all shouting and celebrating, and the King of Sweden came onto the pitch to congratulate us all. And I just wanted to speak to my mum and dad and tell them that the King had shaken my hand and that we'd won the World Cup.
And the funny thing is that I went to change into my clothes. I was looking everywhere for Pepe, couldn't find him, and then went back and slept. So, I couldn't have fun or celebrate. I never celebrated that first World Cup.
There were celebrations aplenty in Brazil, though. The ghost of 1950 had been laid to rest. The homecoming proved as much when the team eventually made it back to Rio via Paris, Lisbon and Recife. The arrival of the trophy Brazil had so long coveted, sparking jubilation all over this vast country.
After Rio, we then had to go to Sao Paulo. We arrived in our hotel at 5 a.m. and then at 7 a.m. we had to get on a flight to Sao Paulo. Obviously at Sao Paulo there was another procession from the airport to the stadium.
Pelé and Garrincha had now become bona fide superstars, and their respective clubs wasted no time in cashing in on their fame. Both Santos and Botafogo embarked on worldwide tours, earning fortunes, enabling each to keep hold of their stars. But it wasn't just Pelé and Garrincha who could play. Santos boasted Zito, Gilmar, Pepe, Mauro, Mengalvio and Coutinho, whilst the Rio club Botafogo had Milton Santos, Didi, Amarildo and Mario Zagallo.
Botafogo was a great club back then. In the 60s, the 2 best teams were Santos and Botafogo. Santos were a little better. A little better.
That Brazil team was effectively made up from 2 club sides, half Santos and half Botafogo. And that gives you an idea of just how good Santos were. We spent a lot of time playing together.
In Brazil's first match of the 1962 World Cup, 8 of the starting 11 played for either Botafogo or Santos, whose strength was outlined when they lifted the 1962 Intercontinental Cup, a title they retained, confirming their status as the world's strongest club side.
Apart from Pelé, they had some great players. They had Zito. He was the Santos captain, and in the Brazilian national side, he was the real captain. He would argue with everyone, meaning that he wasn't that big, but he had a big mouth.
I was horrible and very demanding. I really was. But it seemed to work.
Zito was one of 11 players in Brazil's first World Cup winning squad who travelled to Chile to defend their title 4 years later.
In 62, Brazil arrived as favourites. The rest of the world discovered us in 58, so we arrived in Chile as world champions. But we had the same staff, the same mentality, and the same ability.
The tournament was shaping up to be Pelé's coronation, the greatest player in the world, on his home continent, leading his team to glory, and he began well, scoring in the opening win against Mexico. But in the following match against Czechoslovakia, Pelé limped off with a groin strain. His World Cup was over.
Foi difícil porque as you can well imagine, it was really difficult being without our most important player in the team at the World Cup finals. Because whether you like it or not, Pelé was the star of that team. And Brazilian football placed all its hopes on him and Garrincha.
Pelé got injured. There was no way of doing tests on him back then, so he was out of the World Cup. Amarildo took his place.
I was confident in my own ability. It wasn't that I was as good as Pelé, but I knew that I could produce the goods on the pitch and play to the best of my abilities. I remember Nilton Santos saying to me, "Kid, don't think you're playing for Brazil. Just think that you're playing for Botafogo. Look who's playing alongside you. Me, Zagallo, Garrincha and Didi. There's 5 of us. So play like you do for Botafogo and forget Brazil."
His first game in that World Cup was against Spain. And to start with, he wasn't playing that well. So some of the players in the team started to get at him a little. The likes of Zito came down a little heavy on him, just to get him going. And fortunately, he exploded into action after that.
I knew that it would be a definitive game. Either us or Spain would go through. And we won 2-1, and I scored both goals, which was a great reward for all the work we'd put into that game. I think it was a great victory. To beat a national team who could easily have won the World Cup that year.
We looked to Garrincha when things weren't going well, both in 62 and 58. Nilton Santos would shout, "Give the ball to Mane," and Garrincha would get the ball, dribble down the wing, and then cut it back for either Vava or Pelé, who'd usually score.
Garrincha demonstrated his full range of skills against a strong England team, scoring twice as Brazil ran out 3-1 winners.
He was like having an extra weapon in your armoury. He played phenomenally against England, and they were a good team. But to have stopped Garrincha that day, they'd have needed a machine gun.
On the pitch, he could destroy any fullback he faced. He could go past 2 or 3 players at a time. Just a fantastic dribbler.
He's the only player who is loved by every single fan from every single club in Brazil. Garrincha doesn't belong to any one club. Every club in Brazil supported Garrincha. He was the joy of the people, as they used to say. Because when Garrincha played, it even entertained the opposition. He was incredible. I don't think you could ever get another player like Garrincha.
Against the hosts in the semi-final, Garrincha's good form continued. He opened the scoring after 9 minutes, before adding a second just after the half hour. and despite the hostility of the partisan crowd, Brazil eventually defeated Chile 4-2. Though the victory, it seemed, had come at a price. Garrincha had been sent off in the 83rd minute after retaliating to Chilean aggression, and to add insult to injury, was struck by a bottle thrown from the crowd as he walked from the field. To the enormous relief of millions of Brazilians, he was cleared to play in the final. With an injured Pelé watching on, Brazil went 1 down to Czechoslovakia after just 15 minutes, but equalised almost immediately through Amarildo. Then in the 70th minute, Zito's moment of glory.
It was the winning goal. And it was funny. I was near Mauro at the back. And when I started to run, I shouted, "Pass it! Pass it!" And Mauro passed me the ball. Amarildo was running down the left wing, and I passed it to Amarildo. "Pass it! Pass it!" I shouted. And right at the top end of the pitch, I shouted, "Pass it!" again. And he crossed the ball. I jumped up on my own and scored with my head. The best goal of my life was that one. It gave us our second World Cup.
Garrincha won that World Cup for Brazil. In that tournament, he scored from a free kick, he dribbled like he always did, he scored with his head, he even scored with his left foot. He was inspired in that World Cup. I think an angel was watching.
Garrincha.
There's something that I'd like every football fan to know. Myself and Garrincha played in the national team together for around 12 years, from 1958 onwards, until Garrincha passed away. And when we did play together for Brazil, we never lost a single game. We were unbeaten.
Unbeaten perhaps, but both they and Brazil struggled at the next World Cup in England. 4 years later, however, Pelé inspired Brazil to glory in Mexico, winning the joueur, mais trophy for a 3rd time. In 2012, Pelé returned to the scene of his coming of age. Former teammates and opponents gathered in Gothenburg's Rasunda Stadium to remember that day in 1958 when Brazil cast a spell upon football fans the world over. Having passed away in 1983, Garrincha was sorely missed. If Pelé is renowned as Brazil's greatest ever player, Garrincha, the joy of the people, remains the most loved. His name now adorns Brasilia's World Cup stadium, and he'll forever be revered for erasing the pain of 1950, alongside Mexico 1970 was a World Cup of firsts. The first to be held outside Europe or South America. The first time the tournament was broadcast live in colour. But it was also a last look at the joueur, mais trophy, because by lifting it for the 3rd time, Brazil would keep it forever. It was arguably the greatest World Cup, won by perhaps the greatest team.
It's a story that I have to thank God for, because it's such a great story, very emotional.
Goodison Park, England, 1966. Brazil were looking to win their third successive World Cup, but a 3-1 defeat to Portugal dumped them out of the tournament at the first stage.
Brazilian football isn't violent by nature, and so we didn't know how to play hard like the Europeans. They would play hard but fair. That wasn't in our nature. So from that point on, a plan was put into action that gave more value to our physical preparation, because the next World Cup was in Mexico, where we'd have to play at altitude. And if we wanted to win the title, then we knew we'd have to give a bit more to our physical preparations. And that's what happened.
In response to the perceived failure, their 1958 winning manager Vicente Fiola was dismissed, but his replacement, Aimore Moreira, lasted just 2 years. Finally, in 1969 came the appointment of João Saldanha.
Saldanha had his own style. In the qualifiers in 1969, he said, "This is my team. Players will only get dropped if they play really badly or get injured." So I think I only played in one of the qualifiers.
Brazil won all 6 of their qualification matches, but the campaign was not trouble-free. The new manager refused to select personal favourites of Brazilian President General Medici, and had also considered dropping Pelé. For Saldanha, it was not the end of the controversy.
Saldanha was a temperamental guy. He'd go after any of the journalists who criticised his side. His great error came when he received some heavy criticism from Flamengo's coach, Ustrich. He then went after Ustrich with a gun, trying to shoot him. The president of the Brazilian FA, João Havelange, decided to remove him from his post. That's when Zagallo was chosen.
Mario Zagallo had played in Brazil's previous 2 World Cup triumphs. His hero status was therefore assured, as was his confidence in his own ability.
That team was known as Saldanha's Beasts, so Zagallo made a few changes, got them playing in his style, put his tactical scheme in place, and brought the team together.
I made various changes. I put Piazza at the back, who was normally a midfielder. Clodoaldo and Rivellino were on the bench, but I put both of them in the first team. Trostão played a lot deeper, so I put him right up front. Everyone tracked back and defended as a team, and when we attacked well, with Rivellino, Gerson, Pelé, Jezinho on the right wing, and our right back, Carlos Alberto. And so we were left with 3 at the back, Everaldo, who was left back, Piazza, and Brito.
It was a Brazilian squad bristling with attacking talent. The team was captained by Santos right back Carlos Alberto, but it was a Santos teammate who remained the star attraction. A man who had won the World Cup twice already, the most famous footballer on the planet, Pelé.
In 58, all I wanted to do was play. I didn't have that pressure of people telling me I had to win or I had to play well. But after playing in 62 and 66, where I was injured, 1970 was extremely difficult for me because there was a lot of pressure. Brazil had its own problems with a military dictatorship in power at the time, and the political situation was rather confused. I'd thought about quitting. President Havelange, who was with FIFA but Brazilian, tried convincing me to play. I said, "I'll go, but it will be my last World Cup."
The tournament began in May 1970, and the task facing Brazil was all too clear. In Group 3, they faced 3 European sides.
England, who were the holders, Czechoslovakia, who became European champions, and Romania, the new European sensations. We left the country with everyone thinking Brazil wouldn't even get through their group.
We prepared for 21 days in Guanajuato, which is at the same altitude as Mexico City. So, our preparation was done scientifically and already with the aim of winning the title. But we ended up playing our games in Guadalajara, which is only 1,600 meters, practically at sea level.
Before the tournament began, we couldn't be too sure of ourselves. We had to go out and play to show that the work we'd put in was going to give us results. And I remember we went a goal down in that game against Czechoslovakia, even though the game was well balanced.
With just over 20 minutes played, Pelé won a free kick on the edge of the area. Up stepped Roberto Rivellino.
Technically, it's hard to even talk about how good he was. He played for Corinthians, which is the most popular team in Sao Paulo. The Corinthians fans loved him. They called him the kid from the park, the little king.
He was known as the atomic shot as he struck the ball so hard.
Brazil took charge, and so did Pelé. Gerson set up the number 10 for his first goal of the tournament, and from then on the result was never in doubt.
That's a dream, a real privilege to play with guys like that. So much creativity and ability to start attacks. I won't mention Pelé, he's not on quite the same level, as he was from a different planet, so he's not allowed in this contest.
As the Czechs tired, Jairzinho scored twice. His second was one of the goals of the tournament, and collectively it was a team performance which sent out a warning. The Brazilians were winning the hearts and minds of the Mexican fans, but the same could not be said for the next opponent, England. Sir Alf Ramsey's men were still the reigning world champions, and as such would provide the stiffest of tests.
They had kept most of that side together, although now they had 4 more years' experience and had some great players like Gord's Games there. But if we finished second, we'd have to play our next match at altitude, and against who? An excellent West German side.
We played our normal game, but we took into account England's physical prowess and their individual ability. They marked well, they were quick, good in the air, which is one of English football's main strong points. I think I lost nearly 5 kilos playing in that game. After the game, we had to take on a special diet.
That game to me was probably the most outstanding international football match that I was involved in. The game itself was just everything that you could expect from a football match.
But the national team was in great shape, and so much so that in the second half of games in Guadalajara, we were always better than in the first.
And so it proved. On the hour mark, Brazil finally broke the deadlock. Jairzinho scored the only goal of the match.
It was like a game of chess. We could have lost 1-0, or drawn, or won 1-0. It was a sensational game, played in the head, which we were lucky enough to win.
The pressure had been partially lifted heading into the final group match against Romania. Brazil won 3-2, with goals from Pelé either side of Jairzinho to win their group with maximum points.
We were so happy because we hadn't lost a game and would stay in Guadalajara right up to the semi-final. By staying there, we didn't have to move around the country. It was great for us.
Their opponents in the quarter-final were fellow South Americans Peru, and in the opposite dugout was a very familiar face. Didi had won 2 World Cups with Brazil. Now he'd guided a talented Peru to the runners-up spot in their group.
Didi was considered one of the best coaches in Brazil.
He knew exactly how we played. We knew how difficult it would be, and it was difficult beating Peru. Even though we felt
Lino, Pele, Tostão, to have a team with 5 aces like that, in a deck of cards you only get 4. But that national team had 5 aces who were all exceptional players. So it was amazing to be able to play, look up, and see those 5 players in front of you. It was really incredible.
Brazil's semi-final berth was secure and confidence was high, but that confidence was about to be tested by a familiar foe. 2 decades earlier, Brazil had been defeated by neighbours Uruguay in a World Cup final at their very own Maracanã, and they suffered an inferiority complex that lasted 20 years. The Uruguay defeat led to the national team not playing at all for 2 years, and eventually saw them change their original white shirts to the now famous yellow.
Brazil fans would come to our hotel, and everyone would be talking about the game in 1950. Would the same thing happen again? And I think psychologically that had a negative influence on our morale.
It showed. Brazil began nervously. Uruguay took a shock lead.
I remember their commentator from the sporting radio station of Montevideo started going crazy as if they'd won the game. He turned around and faced us and said, "We're going to beat you again."
Despite their ability, the Brazilian attack struggled to break down the meanest defense in South America.
The brains behind our team was Gerson. He was an incredible player, and he commanded the team just as he did at Botafogo. Everything came through him. But the Uruguay coach was the only one in that World Cup who realized that fact. So he stuck a player on Gerson to be his shadow. Not right on top of him, but enough for him to go wherever Gerson went, so he wouldn't pass him the ball.
It was down to a 6th member of the team to take centre stage, Clodoaldo.
I scored 1 goal in that World Cup against Uruguay, and I thought it was I'm trying to think of how best to say it. A big risk that I took. A player like me to get up the pitch and score with those 5 guys in front of me. But that's what happened. And it happened because one of the 5 told me to do it. That was Gerson. He told me to get forward more in that game.
We had several leaders. We had very mature players. It was a team who knew how to do things. It was only in the game against Uruguay where at half-time I had to give them a good talking to. I had to motivate them.
We couldn't disappoint the Brazilian people again when they were expecting so much more. He really tried to make us emotional so that each one of us got goosebumps listening to it.
Zagallo's words had the desired effect. Jairzinho gave Brazil the lead with 15 minutes remaining, and any further doubt was removed when Rivellino sealed a 3-1 win. And in the closing minutes, Pelé still had time for something special.
We always said that Pelé's thought process was so quick, that he was several seconds quicker than the rest of us. When you stopped to think about what he was about to do, he'd already done it. His thinking and his overall movement was just so fast. I don't think there will ever be a player as perfect as he was.
The Brazilians had again reached the World Cup final, and a nation rejoiced. Only one more challenge remained, and it was posed by Italy. Both nations had won 2 previous World Cups, and if any added incentive were needed, the winners of this one would get to keep the trophy.
I saw all those Brazilians and Mexicans with the Brazil flag shouting, "Brazil, Pelé!" It just made me well up. I wanted to stop crying, but I couldn't. I tried to hide it as I was the oldest and most experienced player. And I didn't want the other players to think, "Why is he crying?"
Italy had a great team. Just the way in which they played, especially their marking. They liked to man mark and go wherever their man went. That was a big mistake against a top team. Not just against Brazil, but any other decent side. There was a lot of movement from our players, so that we would interfere with their marking.
After a tentative start, Brazil's tactics paid off, and the scorer of his nation's 100th World Cup goal was a surprise to no one.
I'd scored a header against Sweden in my very first World Cup. And then I scored again with my head in my farewell game against Italy as a world champion. So, that was marvellous.
In 70, it seemed that he prepared himself for an honourable farewell, worthy of Pelé. And he had an incredible World Cup, and deservedly so, because he was the greatest player in the world.
He had such charisma on the pitch, and he was also able to get away from his marker very easily. We'd always have one or two people stuck on him, but then you'd look up and see that he'd stolen 4 yards on his marker and think, how did he do that? But that's a trademark of a great player, and there were no greater than him.
But Brazil's high lasted only until the 37th minute, when an error from Clodoaldo led to an Italian equaliser. Brazil had to regroup and stick to the game plan.
Brazil's aim was to keep possession of the ball. That's what we always tried to do anyway, but we tried to do it even more in that game to try and exhaust the Italians. And we really felt that we'd done that in the second half. When we started to knock the ball around, we felt that Italy no longer had the energy to mark us in the way that Italian teams normally did.
Midway through the second half, Gerson restored Brazil's lead.
It's not that we didn't respect Italy, but if you analyse the game, then you can see it was Brazil's easiest game of the tournament. It could have been 5 or 6-1 to Brazil, but it was a game that rewarded that national team. Only that national team could have put on a show like that.
5 minutes later, Gerson found Pelé, who found Jairzinho. The number 7 scored his 7th goal in 6 games, making him the first player to score in every match of a World Cup, a record lasting more than 40 years.
Jairzinho was a very strong player, and he just enjoyed a perfect World Cup. I don't think you could give him any less than a 10 out of 10 because he was fantastic. He was always waiting for the ball from